Yeah, I sometimes wonder, especially when it gets to those theories, whether the notion of consciousness as raw qualia is the exact same, whether there isn't a component that's more cognitive that is either understood as consciousness or maybe seen as linked in a way that it can't be dissociated from consciousness. And so I often wonder what that is, part of this fundamental distinction.
Yeah, so in a sense, level of consciousness or presence or absence of consciousness, that's one level of the discussion, right? Like coma, anesthesia, and sleep, and so on. And then the next level that some people talk about is, presence or absence of a particular type of consciousness, but regardless of that, what content is. Like, in the case of the, did you see something or not? Or kind of, distinction, conscious, non-conscious processing, this distinction. Regardless of what you are conscious. And that's the sort of the level that these higher order theory or global neural workspace theory tend to target as an explananda, right? I think. Whether you are conscious of red, and then there are two levels of the consciousness they want to explain. One is a phenomenal consciousness, which is one layer below, or in a sense that's to me it's the most important thing, qualia, the redness. And then the other side is like the fact that I see this red. That's a subjective aspect of the consciousness that higher order theory talks about. And the global neural workspace theory is also, in a sense, this level, not this level.
Right.
And if you are asking that, whether everybody is talking about the same thing, especially this or that, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do with this qualia structure project is to provide, in a sense, format or data to be explained at this level.
Yeah.
Like, large scale, similarity, comparison at the level of consciousness and so on.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but when I present this similarity matrix of the qualia, some people think that, this human similarity matrix, if it's possible to generate by the GPT, and then because I'm kind of defining or trying to characterize the human qualia through this similarity matrix, and if they are trying to generate the same kind of similarity matrix, I must actually admit that they have the same consciousness. That's a kind of idea some of the structurist or functionalist is kind of coming to me.
That's an interesting argument. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but probably I and you have an implicit assumption that this actually has to be coming from the brain, right? Neuroscientific kind of information structure. I and you are probably thinking about more abstract information structure that is extracted from here, and then that is the one that correlates with this more directly. And because we are sharing this level of the thing through the implicit kind of assumption of this to that, and then if we have a similar qualia structure between here and then here, we can kind of estimate that probably I and Alex are experiencing the same qualia, like through this kind of pathway. Do you agree
Yeah, it's
with this?
interesting. I'm thinking about it. It's interesting. It's basically, you know, it's similar to when we do a mental calculation versus a calculator, right? So on some level, functionally speaking, you get to the same thing, but I guess everybody would agree that those are two fundamentally very different things. And but I think I can see if you take a strong stance and you say that if qualia can be completely explained with some kind of similarity matrix, that you would have to bite the bullet and then accept if you can mimic that in a totally different system, that, well, you said that's all there is. So now you'd have to accept that AI is conscious as well. Even though, like you and I agree that it seems so unlikely because the human brain, the substrate that is leading to all of this is so different, right? So if you think about ChatGPT, which is still running on von Neumann architecture, a computer is fundamentally limited to discrete mathematics, for example. A computer cannot do what humans can do by dealing with continuities in mathematics, right? So a computer has to discretize everything because it's only zeros and ones for it. So when it comes to thinking, clearly there's a difference between what a brain can do and what a computer can do. But yes, if you just look at the mechanical output, you can sometimes emulate one by the other.
Yeah, but if you kind of set the criteria about what we can do, kind of criterion, even for the thing that you mentioned, like discretization versus continuity kind of thing, I think computer can do it eventually. Like the natural language processing, which I'm not super expert, has been making a huge progress because they convert, in a sense, this categorical, discrete kind of ideas into so-called embedding, like putting this discrete thing in a continuous space, and then assign the number and also dimension, and then infer the meaning in a probabilistically, and then convert back into the discrete kind of word on the ideas. And that's probably the source of this GPT's success, right? I mean, we are kind of getting to the discomforting zone about this new technology. So I'm not sure how much we can go there, but so I think this continuous discrete kind of limit will be relatively easily surpassed if we set it as a kind of a criterion, like what they can do or not.
That's interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah. I was actually quite surprised when I see that, GPT, if you do the prompt engineering properly, then you can actually get the, very similarity matrix coming from GPT-4 with human similarity matrix. But we know that this is coming from something completely alien, right? And so I'm not very sure about this, but some future version of some kind of GPT like architecture, or maybe much more sophisticated thing might be possessing some kind of recurrent network, and also even with the criterion of phi, it may possess higher integrated information or something. But currently, it's unlikely the case. And the fact that GPT is doing really well in the domain of the language, this is my conjecture, but is something to do with also, our language ability in the human brain is also dependent on unconscious processing.
That's interesting. my interactions with ChatGPT have been interesting in that I asked it about stuff where there's not a whole lot of on the internet. And then basically what you get is just a mishmash of the little bit that exists on the internet.
True. That's true. That's totally true.
Yeah, so it's basically it's literally the same thing as these AIs that generate art, right? So it just starts with a bunch of noise and then takes the little that it can grasp, which again, it seems so different from human thinking. And so if you have these experiences with it, then you can see in other conversations how it acts as an imposter as well. It can be very convincing. But yeah, as you said, this might be more showing us the limitations of language and understanding and stuff that we had in high esteem that we're now realizing maybe that wasn't that special after all. So yeah, so I have like this inverse, but it's all based on intuition. And as I said, like if you ask ChatGPT about scientific problems and you say, give me a citation, others have noticed that as well. It just makes up random citations. They look very real, but if you try to find them, they don't exist. And if you ask it, where's that citation, it will tell you that basically I made an error. So yeah, it's basically like just like a dream. It's just random associations, but these associations can become very convincing. But that seems so different. So I guess that just means in a way that it's still failing the Turing test, right?
Yeah. So the argument was not really so much about current GPT, in fact, but it's more to do with what happens if GPT fall and more and more connections are added, and so multimodal data is added and things like that.
Yeah.
Then,
but again, isn't it interesting?
Definitely, improve. Yes.
Yeah, I feel it goes for me the other way because a dog can do so much less than ChatGPT, but most people feel that their dog is conscious.
Right.
And so now ChatGPT, we're pushing it, and yet most people feel, yeah, it's still not conscious, or at least far away from what we think is human consciousness, right? So I think if anything, it might make it more clear. If you would have a patient that is severely mentally disabled, most of us would treat that patient morally and ethically very carefully, right? So even in the absence of language, we would assume that there is the potential for pain and maybe even humor, but we don't have that for these machines that work so well. And so to me, all of this is kind of going the opposite way, that maybe we're learning, maybe this is going to force us to better define what we mean by consciousness and to question some of these older ideas that tie cognition to consciousness.
Yeah, so it's really exactly what I was actually writing in Japanese, and maybe I should actually also translate it into English. Small kind of essay, but this is a point that IIT also has been making, right? Like consciousness axis and intelligence axis has been over the evolution more or less kind of correlated probably, but we haven't because of the medical advance, we have a situation where we clearly see existence of some people who are likely to be highly conscious, but because they can't move the body at all, like locked-in syndrome, they appear non-intelligent from the viewpoint of the functional causal kind of interaction with the world. If they don't have the particular tool, appropriate tool, they cannot make any difference to the world. And in that sense, their intelligence is low, even though they can be thinking about it in their head, right? On the other hand, these kind of things, like highly capable tools exist, which we don't, assign any consciousness, and we don't know whether they are completely unconscious or not. But from our sort of the intuition, which also it is a kind of dangerous thing to rely on at this stage, because we are very bad at this
True.
part.
Yeah.
Right. The evolutionary kind of thinking or preparation of our brain on the perception is only more or less true around here. So, you know, we are really pretty bad at, you know, what to do with, you know, these parts. And
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah. So
It's still
but anyway, you
interesting
know,
that
yeah.
yeah. Did you see in Nature, for example, there was a editorial and there was a big debate about if you use ChatGPT for your scientific paper, you know, it's going to be more and more whether that should be listed as an author or not. And
Right.
a similar debate happened here by the US Copyright Office in terms of if you know, generate art with an AI machine learning algorithm, can this be copyrighted and who gets the copyright? And in all of these cases, the you know, in the Nature debate, the answer was no, that shouldn't be an author. And by the Copyright Office, the answer was no, there's no human creativity involved, even if you put in a, you know, a prompt or if this all relies on human code. So everything that's generated by AI is in the public domain, at least in the United States. Move from this point on forward. And it shows you how strongly people feel that this is not conscious.
Yeah.